then I came out to the Sun. And I walked into the office of the legendary, never-to-be-forgotten H. LeBaron Strait, the managing editor of the Vancouver Sun. Pierre Berton had just left, and there was a vacancy for a reporter. He looks at me and he says, another, what was it he said? Oh, another bloody limey, something like that. I said, far from it. I'm a good reporter. You can start tomorrow, he said, $45 a week. 45 bucks a week. And that was wasn't anything like I'd be making in London, but it was acceptable money for Vancouver in 1947. I had great fun on the Vancouver Sun.
Wasn't it Jaime Crosthwaite that gave you your first assignment? He said, go out and play a beggar for a day?
Well, that wasn't Crosthwaite, but that was at that time, yes. My first assignment was actually a robbery somewhere or other. But I had to go out and pose as a panhandler. And I was working again with the never-to-be-forgotten, although I'd like to forget him, Ray Monroe. And I'm panhandling at the corner of Hudson Bay and Granville Street, you know, unshaven, old coat, asking to see how much I'm going to get in a day. And Monroe, of course, who's my photographer in the car across the street, calls the police, and I get nabbed. He wanted some action in it. He got the action in it. But Vancouver was a pretty rough town in those days, too. I remember going out and doing a series of stuff on bookmaking, bootlegging, gambling, houses of ill repute. And there were lots of them around. I suppose my favorite story of drugs in Vancouver, forgetting the actual violent ones, was one day when the city police in the Mounties had cleaned the city of all drugs. We had at least 200 druggies out in downtown east side of Vancouver. And they had to bring out squads of policemen to control these druggies who were looking for drugs. Another occasion when I was involved in a penitentiary riot in 1963, a most unhappy, unpleasant affair. I had to fight my way through 400 milling prisoners to get down to where the guard was being held and whose life was threatened. And they wanted to stop me and hold me there because they wanted a public meeting. This was their big demand, to adopt a so-called British system of drugs.
Well, how did you feel when they were insistent that the only person they would negotiate with was Jack Webster?
Well, there was a reason for that. When the warden of the penitentiary, Tommy Hall, phoned me that night, he said, they're demanding to speak to Prime Minister Pearson or Webster, and we can't get hold of Pearson, so we're stuck with you, Mr. Webster. I felt fine about it because I had done a lot of probing and caused some considerable trouble in earlier days in conditions in the BC penitentiary especially, which were not good. And Ocala, you know, we know what Ocala's like today, but the BC pen was not a good place at all.
That became a very famous story, and you were very pivotal in that story. Did you realize at the time how big a scoop you had?
Well, I realized at the time I was kind of stupidly risking my life, I'll tell you that. Oh no, I knew it was a big story. I started at midnight and I finished the negotiations under which the guard was freed eventually, and in which we had a night of terror, no exaggeration.